My name's Joe Biden. I'm running for, in this case, running for President of the United States. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other person.
I just spoke at Dartmouth on health care at the medical school, or not, I guess I wasn't actually on the campus, but the people from the medical school were at the, I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts. I'm not sure whether it was a medical school or where the hell I spoke, but it was on the campus.
I want to thank Rich Fitzgerald, the county executive, Allegheny County executive, for being here. And I propose, and I'm going to digress slightly. We're in a situation. The president asked me to head up a cancer moonshot.
President Biden, just to be clear, would you or would you not rejoin the TPP? Yes or no?
I would not rejoin the TPP as it was initially put forward. In Guatemala, El Salvador, and to win and say in Honduras and say, look, I know I'm called middle class, Joe. It's not meant as a compliment. Means I'm not sophisticated. Let it go. And there's an area where there's an important difference between this and there's an important difference between the candidates. I'm running. The country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and hedge fund managers. This guy is moving to just foment hate. The price for whatever the drug costs are. Well, folks, eliminate one tax loophole out of $1.6 trillion worth, $1.4 trillion worth. Out of $1.4 billion. It's hard to even say it, it's so much. And by the way, it costs a lot of money. It cost about $740 billion over 10 years. Every single solitary person qualified in community college, increasing the number of 6 to 9 million people. If you like your employer-based policy, you can keep that policy. If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. If you want to be part of this campaign, pick up your phones. Pick up your phones. Now. Send a text to the word United to the number 30330. 330 or 303-330 or BOO. Wait. You got it. It's on the back there. Now he's feeling the pressure of an economy that's teetering on a recession. To say that LGBTQ people have no civil rights. And immediately changed the law in the state of Delaware protecting transgender people. I took on Putin in terms of in terms of what was going on in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. My long friend, time friend, and she's a friend. She's been my friend in and out of public life. It will cost 1/30th. Costs a lot of money. Almost $740 billion to do what I want to do over 10 years. But not $30 trillion. Not $30 trillion. Among many qualified people, I'm the best qualified person for this job. And the reason is not just to help people who have or in fact are likely to get Alzheimer's. Because think of what's been adopted. Milton Friedman's notion that the only obligation. But that all changed with our Republican friends in the late 80s when they adopted Milton Friedman's notion that the only obligation. We find ourselves in a position where you're in a circumstance where we've adopted Milton Friedman's notion, the conservative economist. Now, if in fact you are in a position, what was the case, you worked for Jimmy. That's why we're so special. It took courage. It took resilience. They know who we are. We have to let them know who we are. We can do it, and it's going to take billions of dollars to do it, and we can afford to do it. We can't afford not to do it. Cut in half the number of uninsured of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Cut in half. Don't worry, I'm so serious. Children, I love to hear them. But President Trump and the demagogues around the world. But if Donald Trump is reelected, so people are figuring out there's not a damn thing we can do that we set our mind to that we can't get done. The single most stressed I was asked to speak to the American Psychiatric Association, to go over to the University of London and speak to the World Psychiatric Association. It's interesting. I just spoke to the International Society of Psychiatric, the International organization of psychiatrists, I forget the formal name of it, over in London because this is not a Republican talking point. The Republicans are trying to kill Obamacare. Union workers, the UAW took incredible cuts in their future. Now we have $1.6 trillion worth of loopholes in the law. But I never ever thought that I'd see what I saw in Charlotte. You know, I came home from law school. Avoid having an excuse to walk by the dealer and say, no, I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom. If we just were to reinstitute the CAFE standards. And I think Secretary, excuse me, the press going to say I'm downgrading him by calling him Senator Booker. The fact is that the bills that the future president here, that the senator is talking about. I was the one that suggested to the President Obama, I don't want to confuse presidents here. Look, we provide a Medicare option. That's exactly what Barack and I talked about in the beginning.
Couldn't get it through, though.
So I couldn't tell anybody but Barack. He's one of my closest friends. Invaded another country and annexed a significant portion of it called Crimea. Right. He's saying that it was my boss, it was his fault. I got assault weapons banned for 10 years. It had to be reauthorized because of hanging chads in Florida. The last president said, no, I'm not going to reauthorize it. We need to work again with Canada and Mexico as neighbors, not as adversaries. Saks or Benettons or Nike or whatever in the market in their places where the malls. Donald Trump does pose an extra threat to this. It's not hypothetical. We can put every one of them in school, cutting in half the cost of a four-year education. Why they do that? I ran what they call the moonshot, dealing with cancer, and something after that set up the Biden Cancer Initiative. And here's the point: the conservative columnist, and they'd say to you, "Take my shotgun." I said, "I have 3. I now have 5 because my son died, and I have 3 of his. I have 5 shotguns." So have a mechanism to control drug prices. You know, it's not. We're no longer using chemical-based things. All this thing we're dealing with, cancers and other issues relating to the immune system, are bio-oriented. And by the way, the idea that NATO, the only people who entitled to rewards, are stockholders. Ladies and gentlemen, he is deliberately and completely ignoring the legitimate authority of the Congress, and he's doing what he does with the complicity. Stop trying to keep your workers organized. By his failure to exercise any international leadership. It's about all these breakthroughs we have with dealing with the whole, immune system. I want you to know, if you look at PolitiFacts, we're no longer the wealthiest middle class in the world. It means investing much more in medical research to conquer devastating diseases like cancer and addiction and Alzheimer's. The opportunities are amazing. We are in a position to be able to lead the world like we've never been able to do it before. I mean, they're not bad folks, but guess what? I found that the secretary, we sat together in many meetings. There's things that are worth dealing with China tough on. What presidents say matter. We also know we need teachers. My wife is a full-time teacher, taught all during when we were vice president. High-quality options. The public option will be available in my plan. We'll make sure it's not quality. We'll make sure it's only affordable. Quality that's affordable, not the end in themselves. It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. Not those of us running for president alone. Not just activists like you. You know how many tax loopholes there are in the code now? Yeah. $1,640 billion. Eliminate one. How can a person dignity be maintained? We choose truth over facts. You ever heard a president of the United States talk about law enforcement like he did today? I oversaw, as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee a long time, the FBI. Look what he talks about. But we lead by the example of our power, not just the power, not just the example of our power, but the example we're out there, and it's what we say. By strengthening. We have to eliminate the funding gap that exists between minority white and majority white and non-white districts. The fact of the matter is, I'm awfully sophisticated about why, how, and who built this country. Let me say this simply and clearly. They are not national assets. Wall Street bankers, CEOs, hedge fund managers, no matter how good and decent they are, they're not the ones who built this country. That triumph of democracy and liberalism over fascism and autocracy. When I got out of school, that when Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King had been assassinated in the 70s, late 70s, when I got engaged. 1787, the United States Constitution. I'm going to publicly apologize for not being able to make it. We don't always live up to that's who we are. No other nation was founded the way we are. We hold these truths self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator. No nation has ever been founded on that principle. That was a time in the late 60s, the early 60s and 60s, where it was drop out, go to Haight-Ashbury. We can do this by making sure that we're in a position that we, in fact, allow people. Time's up. I agree that everybody, once they, in fact, anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Vice President.
But here's the deal, folks. You know, well, I think it shouldn't matter where your race. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. We can speak out and be more straightforward. Senator John, I mean, but I mean, it's not about, I know you're supporting by saying booing, but look, here's the deal. You don't have here in Miami, in Florida. You don't have it here, and that is if you keep an audience. That's why I'll end the gag rule, the global gag rule that prevents money from getting to NGOs. In terms of the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacy. And if we give Donald Trump 4 more years, we'll have a great deal of difficulty, if ever, being able to. I looked at it anyway. That's what I think my plan. I know what my plan does. Such as de-escalation studies have marked. Excuse me. There have been de-escalation studies. The reason I did what I'm doing is because there's a invasion of Hispanics. She has an expression. She teaches full-time and has taught full-time. She taught full-time as a second lady. She taught 15 credits a semester. She's never stopped teaching. She's going back in 2 weeks to teach as well, to continue to teach. 65 out of every 100 jobs today require training beyond high school. 65 out of every 100. $30 trillion. That makes it far more durable, reliable, and powerful. And partnerships built on coercion. And Lisa, you have been a great friend for a long time. And your Paul son is remarkable. You know, they also got that last year. And for folks in the working class that are below 400, they will, in fact, increase their premiums. Will increase the generosity of the premium tax credit they now get. They go to school from a middle class or upper middle class, and having heard, the estimates are as many as 4 million more words spoken. You know, the next thing we got to do here along the line to report people's dignity, restore it. We're the most powerful military, not hyperbole, most powerful military in the history of the world. That's not hyperbole. Which we as a society talk about one another. The way we've always been. Look, my wife, who is a teacher, she's teaching now. She's back in the classroom at a community college where she teaches in Northern Virginia. Things changed. You had over 40 kids shot in Kent State on a beautiful lawn by the National Guard. There are a whole lot of things, and guess what? America didn't live up to that promise for most of the people at the time. The people of color, for women. Farm ownership and cooperating loan and operating loans. I remember sometimes when my dad was restless, my mom would say, because our rooms are next to one another, I'd say, the next morning, what's wrong? I said, your dad can't sleep. He's just staring at the ceiling thinking, what happens? We have to start rewarding work, not just wealth.
The first speech stood up. The chancellor, the former chancellor of Germany, stands up. She says, we have to go it alone.
International leaders spoke about it. You had people like you had people like the former chairman and leader of the party in Germany. You had Angela Merkel stand up and say how terrible it was. I mean, well, look, this is beyond the scope of anything remotely what we've seen before. We provide efficiency for appliances. That saves billions of gallons of gasoline. I mean, billions of I think it's $2.3 billion worth of, $500 billion in savings and 2-point-something billion metric tons of CO2 going in the air. Where an overwhelming number of families, ICE walks into a small Mississippi town and, in fact, arrests hundreds of workers. I was with a world leader in Indonesia who is a guy who is extremely well known and referred to as the Henry Kissinger of Asia. But I underestimated how deep the prejudice is in some sectors of society and how it can be unleashed. By investing $100 billion in education, in global warming efforts, it's a whole range of things. I was told when we were in office, demanding that HIV/AIDS be designated, destigmatized and treated. And that's why we need to make post-secondary education affordable, available, and training, reducing the crushing cost of student loan debt. What's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty of it? And what a neat town. This is sort of a scenic, beautiful town. We can't afford it by just beginning to reward work as much as wealth. While Trump is pursuing a damaging and erratic trade war without any strategy, by the way.
Mr. Biden, they say these gaps in your electability.
Well, that's what we determine pretty soon, won't it?
Thanks, guys.